and appreciate the opportunity to thank the senator for all of his work. This infrastructure thing, and I know your community has been talking about this for a long time, and we've been working very closely with the senator and his team to take the vision and actually get it into a law so we can start seeing the benefits of projects around your state and around your region. It was a hard effort to get it through the United States Senate. The senator took it upon himself to be in the room and make sure that this is the best bill for Louisiana. And in doing so, he brought a bipartisan support to this effort that, again, we don't see it as much anymore, but it's how you have long-term durable legislation. And so really appreciate the efforts of the senator to get us to this point. And we need your help to help us get it through the House of Representatives. But again, just wanted to recognize the great work of Senator Cassidy in getting us to this critical point. So I'll pass it back to you, Senator.
Hey, Ed, and if anybody's confused, it doesn't say Ed Mortimer, it says Lauren Casanova.
Oh boy, now, I see that, but that is not me, obviously.
And that would be a body double, because on my screen, Lauren Casanova is the pretty blonde, and Ed is Ed. And so, so just to make that clear.
Right. I am from DC, so things are a little screwed up these days around here.
Thank you all for being on. Andre, thanks for the intro. Ed, thanks for your comments. The bipartisan infrastructure bill is over $500 billion in spending for infrastructure. And there's a lot of myths and misstatements out there. But let me just say, it is $500 billion, the potential of which is to help Louisiana catch up with where other states are already, and to do some critical work to both take care of the problems we have, but to set the stage for us to have a better future. Now, there's one criticism out there that only 23% of it goes for actual infrastructure. So $1 trillion, so 230 or 250 or something like that billion. I'm about to list some numbers. Just watch the math, and you're going to quickly see that that 23% is totally false. There's $110 billion for roads and highways and bridges. So Louisiana's share of that will be 5.8 or 5.9 billion dollars over 5 years, which is 1.2 billion than we would ordinarily receive. There's 65 billion nationwide to make sure that every American has access to high-speed internet, prioritizing parishes and counties in which there is no internet whatsoever, and those which have inadequate internet. There's areas in your catchment area that have no broadband internet, period. This will change the course of that parish. There's 65 billion for strengthening the grid. So that came to mind because when I flew over Lake Charles after Hurricane Laura, and you saw these big transmission lines just toppled, this strengthens the grid, 65 billion. There is 50 billion for water and sewer projects. So, and of that money, it goes through state revolving funds. 48% of the money that a community would receive is a forgivable grant, and 51 or 52% is for low interest loans. So if your community has problems with flooding, water, or sewer, this is a huge pot of money for you. Additionally, there's $500 million in low interest loans for communities to expand their storm drainage system. So you're in Youngsville and you get 6 inches of rain within 4 hours, like happened in 2016 or even more. If your storm drainage capacity is greater, you're less likely to flood. FEMA is getting $3.5 billion to help with flood mitigation, prioritizing areas which have recently flooded. Now, that doesn't say Louisiana, like Louisiana, but it says Louisiana because Vermilion Parish recently flooded. Lafayette Parish recently flooded. There is 50 billion for resiliency, including 17 billion for the Army Corps of Engineers, including billions to go for coastal restoration, prioritizing those states which have had natural disasters hit their shoreline over the last 6 years. Once more, it does not have the word Louisiana, but it says Louisiana. Our state benefits from those provisions. There is 60 billion for freight and rail. There's 39 billion for transit. There's 17 billion for transportation projects of regional and national significance. There is 15 billion in competitive grants through build and infrastructure grants for roads and highways that is separate from the $110 billion I've already listed. There's $9.5 billion for ports and waterways. I could keep on going, but let me stop there. Always I stop and then something comes to mind in a little bit. But this is about infrastructure. It doesn't have social programs. It doesn't have Green New Deal. It has that which is important to the future of our communities, our state, and our country. Let me say a couple things also, because there's been questions as to whether or not it's paid for. We always said that CBO would give us credit for half of the amount as a CBO approved paid for. That's what happened. The other half, we always said CBO won't give us credit, but common sense tells you that our paid for is valid. As an example, there's $53 billion that Congress has already appropriated out the door for COVID relief that wasn't spent that we repurpose. As an example, 53 billion on a particular program. In this example, Congress appropriated money for supplemental federal unemployment insurance payments. States like Louisiana ended their programs earlier than they had to. That left $53 billion that Congress had appropriated but wasn't spent. We repurposed that $53 billion to pay for this project. I like to say, instead of paying people not to work, we're paying them to give them a job. I think that's a pretty good symmetry right there. There's 150 billion in other COVID relief bills. Again, money appropriated that we have reallocated to pay for this program. CBO doesn't give us credit. Their rules don't allow it, but common sense tells you, yeah, that's a pay for. The second reason that I can say that it's paid for is that CBO only does its score over 10 years. The Wharton School of Business did a score over 30 years. And when they did their score, they took into account that it takes a while to build infrastructure, but the economic benefit keeps on going for decades. And the Wharton School of Business analysis found that over 30 years, this increases the size of the gross domestic product substantially, and thereby decreases our debt over 30 years. Simple example, if St. Landry Parish has high-speed internet, it's more likely to get a distribution center or some other company locating there. If it does not have high-speed internet, that company will not locate there. The economic growth of St. Landry Parish is going to be greater with high-speed internet. So providing high-speed internet allows that parish to grow more rapidly. Just makes sense. Now take that, not just St. Landry Parish, but our entire state and our entire nation. Just that one provision increases economic growth substantially. I could keep going, but Andre, let me stop and take what questions you have. And I just thank you for being on the call. We need you to understand the bill and to advocate for it, or else it might not pass.
Thank you. And we have 3 questions submitted so far. The first one, and you touched on this a little, is about the new spending versus what's being reauthorized. Could you talk about how much of this bill is new spending and how much of that new spending is on roads and bridges?
Yeah, so about over 500 billion, 525 billion, the number kind of goes back and forth, is new spending. Of that new spending, so and 110 billion is for roads and bridges. I think I mentioned that Louisiana will get 5.8 or 5.9 billion from that total pot of money. And the new spending aspect of that is $1.2 billion. think about the amount of money it takes to build I-49 South. The other thing to say, and I mentioned as well, included in the new spending is an additional pot of $17 billion for transportation projects of regional and national significance. And one could imagine that either the Calcasieu Ship Channel or the Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge could be, the choke points on the east-west corridor from the Pacific to the Atlantic might qualify. And there's also $15 billion in new spending for build grants and infra grants, again, for roads and highways. So there's also pots of money that can enable that spending. The Calcasieu Ship Channel, where the new bridge is going to go, has a chemical dump site that has to be cleaned up on the west bank of the Calcasieu Ship Channel. This money has $21 billion to cap abandoned oil and gas wells, as well as to clean up chemical dump sites. That Calcasieu Ship Channel would qualify for that money to clean up the site. Indeed, Louisiana has 27 Superfund sites on the national priority list to be cleaned up. One more thing I should mention, Andre, I told you I always think of things, but you guys in Lafayette are building a new airport. There's $25 billion for FAA to help upgrade and to rebuild new airport, helioport type structures. And so just to also mention that, because I didn't want to forget.
Well, another priority for us here in the Acadiana region is the completion of the I-49 Lafayette connector. Could you talk a little bit about the potential for funding for that project?
So again, I mentioned that there's 5.8, 5.9 billion statewide extra money coming in over 5 years. 1.2 billion of that would be new money. The other thing to point out is that in this bill, we change permitting. Currently, it takes an average of 6 years to permit a project like I-49 South. This puts in regulatory reform that, based upon pilot projects, shortens the 6 years to 2.5 years. Less money for lawyers and bureaucrats and more money for construction workers. And so this would be not just more money, but the money being used more wisely. I'll also point out as well that I think today or yesterday, Sean Wilson, Secretary of Department of Transportation and Development in Louisiana, said there's money in this package adequate to benefit every region of the state. I'd have to think I-49 South would be the priority in Acadiana.
Absolutely. Well, we have a couple more questions in the chat. One relates to timing of passage, and another relates to kind of the politics and the holdup in the House on the Democratic side. Could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, the two are related, and it kind of comes back to a role that you folks can potentially play. Pelosi's only got a 3 or 4 vote margin to pass anything. House moderates, Democrats, have said that they want a standalone vote on this infrastructure bill before they will vote for anything else. So what Pelosi says is, hey guys, if I give you that, I lose my left wing. The squad will vote against the infrastructure bill. The left wing of the Democratic Party will vote against the infrastructure bill. In which case, we need Republicans. I think we need Republicans anyway. The more Republicans that vote for this bill, the more likely it passes as a standalone bill. Pelosi wants to link it to her tax and spend extravaganza. She doesn't think she can pass it unless she links it. If we get Republicans to vote for the standalone, she can't link them, which makes it less likely that we pass the 3.5 trillion tax and spend extravaganza. Your advocacy is important. Clay Higgins is opposing this bill. Mike Johnson is opposing this bill. I'm not sure why. When I look at their comments, I say, well, you said it's only 23%, but I just gave you a list far higher than 23%. You say it's socialism, but I don't see any socialism in here. We're using private companies and private businesses to, I will admit, Lafayette has a municipal-owned internet service, so Lafayette could get money to upgrade their ISP. But that's Lafayette's decision. Is that what you're calling socialism? It just kind of, I don't see where they're coming from. We need them to vote for it, or otherwise the squad dictates how it goes. Your advocacy is important for this. Your phone call, your text message, your email, this kind of like, wait a second, I've got this myths versus facts document, and you're telling me something which is not true, and I can point it out. You say that there's Green New Deal in there. Where is it? Wait a second. That's something you authorized last Congress that President Trump signed into law. This bill just funds that which you previously voted for. And President Trump signed into law. What's the problem there? You on this call can help pass this bill. By the way, not just your member of Congress, but you are connected across the nation. So the degree that you ask your friends, colleagues across the nation to advocate for this bill, and we get Republicans to vote for it, that takes away the influence, the leverage of the far left, and it puts it with Republicans and the moderate Democrats.
Well, and you're doing a great job getting out the facts, and we've sent out your myths versus fact sheet, but we'll send it out again to everyone on this call today, because I think it's a great tool for dispelling some of the misinformation that's out there. Chad Lacombe with the Acadiana Planning Commission put in the chat a link to a new report that APC did on broadband infrastructure, which is an excellent report. You've spoken a little bit about broadband. We know that's particularly an issue in our rural parishes. Could you just speak a little bit more to the importance of this bill for broadband deployment?
I think some people are saying that that's not hard infrastructure. I would argue that is the highway of the future. And that my wife once told me, by the way, I figure a man lives where either Uncle Sam or his wife tells him to, right? I make the big decisions. My wife makes the little decisions, like how many children we have, where we live, and, little decisions like that. I make a decision as to what we should do about China. And so you're not going to have a woman allow her family to live in a community unless they have access to Netflix, to telehealth, to telemental health, to education programs. If her daughter wants to study Mandarin and Opelousas doesn't have a Mandarin teacher, then she'll feel better if her daughter can access that via the internet. We have to recognize, as Acadiana has, that you are not going to have the economic growth that you can have unless your community has broadband, high-speed internet. This bill prioritizes those parishes and counties which have no high-speed internet or which have inadequate high-speed internet. Every parish in our state, save one, will benefit from that provision. $65 billion. I would argue that unless your parish has high-speed internet, it's going to be very difficult for your parish to have a significant economic growth over the next 10, 15 years. This enables that growth.
And I want to give a shout out to both Monique Boulay and Chad Lacombe with the Acadiana Planning Commission on the call today. They've set a goal that for 10 gigs in 10 years to our entire region. And I think the federal infrastructure bill will certainly help us out toward that goal. We have one more question in the chat from Adam Henry. He's asking if you could expand on the HERO program, the HERO program. I'm not sure if you want to.
I'm not familiar with the HERO program. I'm sorry. If you can give me a little bit of a description, then sometimes I don't know the acronym, but I know it by what it does.
So Adam, if you'll put that in the chat, any more information on the HERO program, we can try to take your question. I'll give a last call for questions. I think you have another one of these coming up at 10:30 with the Baton Rouge Area Chamber, maybe.
Yes.
So I know we want to give you a couple of minutes to catch your breath between calls. But while we wait for any last questions, and Adam's saying it's the he's referring to the Healthcare Reinvestment Opportunity Program.
I am not familiar with that, but we'll get back to you, Adam. I will say that in our pay-fors, we did not touch the money that is in the provider relief program. And so for those communities or those hospitals, nursing homes, et cetera, that are being kind of battered by the after effects of the pandemic, that provider relief set of dollars are still there to help healthcare providers.
We'll take one last question that I saw just entered into the chat and then give you a second for any closing comments. This is something you've touched on a little bit already, but if you'll speak to it again, how the country plans to pay for these investments.
Yeah, so again, we feel like we have reasonable pay-fors. The reasonable pay-fors being both the things that CBO gives us credit for, as well as those repurposed COVID relief dollars that by their rules, CBO can't give us credit for. And I also agree with the Wharton School of Business's approach of scoring this over 30 years. Again, they showing that it increases our gross domestic product and it decreases our debt. But I'll also offer this. Does it cost more or cost less to invest in coastal restoration now or in 20 years when our coastline is further receded? Does it cost more or cost less to put in flood mitigation now or to wait till it floods several more times and we have to pay for people to rebuild their lives? Does it cost more or cost less to invest in a bridge structure when it just needs a little bit of repair or to wait until it is completely collapsed? Clearly, to ask the question is to beg the answer. For those who say we can't afford to do this, I would argue that we can't afford not to. There are some who say, oh, this is all about the swamp. I say to those folks, you seem to forget. We have lots of swamps in Louisiana and we're trying to restore our coastline to make them into solid ground. And we're using private companies who hire private businesses. We're putting in permitting reform, which takes power away from federal bureaucrats and it puts more money into the private businesses and the workers they employ to build the infrastructure. In many different ways, we pay for this and we make it more affordable, but ultimately, I don't think we can afford not to do it. And anyone who has looked at our coastline and knows the ramifications of it melting away with all the risk that puts to communities for flooding and for hurricane damage. Again, pay me now or pay me later, but if you pay me now, you pay less. We're about paying less now, protecting our assets, protecting our people.
Thank you very much. Ed, did you want to say something before we close out?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for participating. And again, we're close, but we need your help with your House members. So please contact your House members. The Senator has laid out the myth fact sheet. We're glad to support you if you have any questions. But again, this is so critical to long-term economic growth and quality of life. So please contact your members and let us know if we can help. Monique is here as well, so let us know if we can help you in any way. And again, Senator, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you once again, Ed. Thank you, Senator Cassidy, for your leadership, for being with us today. Thank you to your team, to Lauren, who's so great to work with always. And we really appreciate you getting out this quality information to us. We will, like I said, follow up with your Myths First fact sheet. We'll send out a recording. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and we can either answer your questions or put you in touch with someone who can.
Hey, thank you, Andre. Thanks for everybody being on the call. Advocate, advocate, advocate if you think it's good to have this bill. And Ed, thank you and Monique for being on as well.
Everyone have a good day. Thank you all.